Welcome to this hour of Cyber Power with Tigray. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Helena Tadesa. Today's Cyber Power of Tigray, I have the distinct honor and pleasure of having Mr. Brent Diaz. Brent, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. No, it's definitely an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
I would like to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself formally to our viewers. As you know, I've mentioned we have as many healthcare professionals as possible, specifically speaking on mental health and wellness during this crisis, which is a full-blown genocide. So I do want to give you a chance to introduce yourself, please.
Sure. I'm living in the Toronto, Canada area, and what I am is I'm a trauma therapist for people, for newcomers to Canada, so for refugees and newcomers to Canada. So I work with people from around the world, providing trauma therapy for them. I also teach at two universities in the social work departments here in the Toronto area, York University and Lakehead University, where I teach on a variety of courses on things like addictions, eating disorders, counseling, and other topics too as they come up. And I've had the opportunity to collaborate with communities all over the world. Really, I've done quite a bit of teaching in Eastern Europe, in places like Ukraine and Lithuania. But I've also spent quite a bit of time in various countries in Africa, teaching on trauma in places like Kenya, in Malawi as well, working with the sexual assault clinic there. And also doing some consulting work with an organization from Rwanda that works with people who've experienced genocide there. So all of these different things that I've done have been kind of related to trauma. So that's me in a nutshell, just in terms of my work and professional life, really. But really, I want to say that, yes, I'm not from Tigray, and that maybe is very obvious in a lot of ways, but I'm really concerned about what I've been following this on the news for months now, and really concerned about what's happening. And so I just want to be just another voice that isn't necessarily from that community, saying, hey, I hear what's going on, I see what's going on. And with my career, I understand a lot of the pieces that are going on too, I think, and how it's impacting people. And I want to show my support and solidarity with your community. So thank you so much for having me here today.
I can't begin to tell you how deeply your words right now affect me, and I can only imagine for everyone who is watching now and everyone who will be watching, there's something about this crisis that from the very beginning, it felt like screaming into an abyss where we were all letting the world know what was happening, but there was a gaslighting situation happening on the other end, where the federal government was supposing that no child, no women have been hurt. This is just a law enforcement deal. There's nothing really going on. And to this day, I mean, as news trickles out, as the reality of the atrocities really come to light, to this day, it's push and pull with the truth, you know. So for someone, like you said, outside of the community, say, I hear you, I see you, there is a true sense of being seen, which is priceless as we continue in advocacies and all these work. So thank you for saying that. And in all truth, you are our first guest here on mental wellness in time of crisis, who is outside of our community. So it's a big deal. I have to really thank my cousin, Dr. Meron, for introducing me to you. And in just looking into your background, seeing some of the conversations, a conversation you've had with the Rwandan community, or I should say regarding the Rwanda genocide within that community, I really I felt as if you would understand, if anyone. Because in therapy, there's got to be the context, right? I've made it my mission to have people from the community, because I wanted to be sure we're having this conversation within the context of the Tigrayan culture. So with any of these conversations, we begin with defining terminology, and trauma we've defined and redefined, but it's always good, I think, to get the person's perspective. How do you define trauma? What definition of trauma do you use extensively?
Definitely. So you can basically look at trauma is, it's actually a complicated question, more complicated than maybe what it appears on the surface. But essentially, trauma is an experience that someone has that overwhelms their normal capacities to cope. It's also can be seen as an experience, and this is a theme I think we'll draw from today, an experience where people, their body goes into like a survival mode. All right, and so really it could be anything, really. Like now, of course, the things that people are experiencing in Tigray, I mean, they totally fit the definition of kind of like the textbook definition of trauma in terms of the various kinds of violence and sexual violence and things like that. But they could also be, it could also be seen as anything that overwhelms someone, right? And so what that does is that also broadens the scope of the definition of trauma, so that it's not like you have to be on the ground to experience it, but you can also be overwhelmed in other ways, right? So you're having the experience of hearing about something, for instance, which I anticipate, and actually I know a lot of people in your community are experiencing right now, and still feel a lot of the same symptoms and a lot of the same issues that the people on the ground are also experiencing just from hearing it, right? And so that's a real definable thing. It's in all the official diagnosis. And of course, I'm really like I'm trying to use everyday language. There's all kinds of terms I could bring up that, explain it from kind of like an academic point of view. But the bottom line is that in all the official like documents about diagnosing trauma and things like that, there is talk about how if you hear about this overwhelming event from a loved one, then you yourself can also experience trauma. Like it's in the official diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder. And so what I'm trying to say is that for like the diaspora, for like all the people, the Tigray people who are like in places like in America or Canada or other countries, hearing about loved ones and feeling like more than just feeling sad, right? Like feeling it in your body, feeling things that are really maybe even disturbing. Those things are real. They're real reactions that you're having, again, that are definable, that we understand in the field, and that just want to acknowledge and affirm that what you're going through is real and true. So in a nutshell, that's what trauma kind of is. So what happens is once someone has had this overwhelming experience, whatever it is, and again, it could be really broad, but then what happens is that impact of that traumatic event carries on in the person's life well after the event is over. All right. And so really, I mean, we'll talk about this in a few minutes, I think, but really when we're thinking about someone who's lived through something, for instance, their body goes into that survival mode. And it's like after the event happens, that survival mode continues on in their body, even when they're safe, even when they're okay. Right. And so that's where the problem kind of lies. But when you think about it, what's happening is it's that our body is trying to still protect itself from the danger, which leads to these various symptoms in our bodies and in our minds and in our thoughts and stuff. But what's happening is just that our bodies become too sensitive to the danger. Our bodies are really hardwired to be like really efficient. And so anything that kind of reminds them of the overwhelming event will then trigger their response to that same kind of reaction that they had when they're in the moment of danger. And I'm also going to say too, right off the bat, like I know the topic like this can be really triggering for people, really difficult for people. So I'm not going to really go into much detail about examples or things, right? Like I'm trying to be really careful with that. So if there's anybody who has experienced stuff, or you've heard stuff from family members and it's just overwhelming, I'm going to try to be really careful with that today. But so when I talk about things broadly, it's not that I'm trying to silence the community and what's happening. Obviously, we need some of those details, like in the human rights area and the legal pieces like that. But for today, we're going to try to keep things a little more boundaried.
Right on. I'm so glad you said that. And working and living within the community, I too, I mean, I definitely echo exactly what you're saying. I don't like to just broadly do trigger warning because anything could be triggering.
True. Yeah.
I also know, and I pray that a lot of our community members are, right now, as we speak, there's a campaign going on. We have campaigns, Twitter campaigns, advocacy campaigns happening. And my prayer today is that, Lord, as our family members and community at large are doing this great work, so that people have seen the event being advertised, and some just maybe just by happenstance looking for news actually stop within this moment to just breathe and be mindful of one's well-being. Mental health is so important because uh, for our day-to-day, in order to continue doing the work, in order to show up for our families that are here in front of us, in order to be here and ready to rebuild Tigray, and to really put our arms around those who are, oh my goodness, facing these heinous crimes, face to face, who are there right now, who maybe even within earshot, who may be listening to this, because we know the internet, you can keep it down as long as you can, but there are ways of people of hearing it. So I'm also wanting for us to be mindful. I just pray that those who need to hear it the most, and it is all of us, and especially those facing the atrocities head on, are able to hear this. And in saying that, I will mention the things like the videos, because you, as a therapist who is very much in the know about how it affects communities like ours, I'd love for you to talk about that. So we've defined trauma, something that happens that basically shakes us up and leaves our bodies and minds vulnerable to things like triggers, and we mentioned sort of PTSD, which is basically trauma that is un
not processed, right?
unprocessed. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Unprocessed trauma that lives. So we mentioned a trigger, and defined triggers a couple of weeks ago as something that reminds your your senses of that trauma. So it could be sound, some sight, a phrase, a smell, right? It
Yes.
could be anything that possibly was involved during the trauma, or just something that reminds your being of that, of said trauma. Uh,
Exactly.
like Brent mentioned, if you're hearing about that trauma, it's valid. You have been potentially been traumatized, and that goes for you as well. So it's so important what you said to begin with, saying it's valid. Like
Hmm.
validating our own trauma, being the ones taking it within our hands to say, this is traumatizing stuff. This has affected me, and or this might have affected me, and knowing how important it is to deal with that trauma is so important. Um,
Right.
Brent, I want to talk to you about a lot of these videos that are coming out for the sake of the advocacy, for the sake of letting the international community and just the world at large know this is what's happening to our family members. This is what's happening in Tigray. We're handling sensitive material. We're handling videos. You see it and you wish you hadn't, but you feel compelled. You have to push it out. How are some ways we could be dealing with these videos? How are some ways we could be dealing with these words, constantly tweeting words like genocide, words like rape, these very otherwise really sensitive words and phrases?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, it's a really, really difficult situation, of course, and I feel like it puts folks in this dilemma where, in order to do the advocacy work for your loved ones and just for your people, you're exposing yourself to these themes, to these videos, and even like you said, even those words, so powerful. Um, I even on my social media talked about this very event today, just to ask people to to support or whatever. And I even hesitated, but I did it. I wrote genocide. I wrote violence and all these pieces. And I think that really one thing that we really need to do about all that is to really check in with ourselves. Because the sense that I am getting from different people from Tigray and from the diaspora who I've spoken to is that it's impacting, and it's not easy, and it's hard. And so there is this sense of needing at times to like pull back a little bit, right? Check in with yourself, rejuvenate, focus on, again, like you said, just things that you have to do for your family, showing up for your family or showing up for your job, or just even for yourself for that matter, right? And to not necessarily minimize the impact of this work that you're doing, and like the impact that this is having on you as an individual. And I get that there's probably some people out there who think, well, you know, I'm not going through this. I'm in America or Canada, and I'm fine. But again, the impact is real. It really is. And so to kind of almost treat it like, you know, to acknowledge that, and to just understand the scope and severity of it, that what you're going through is really intense. And the difference maybe between you and some of the folks back home in Ethiopia is that you do get a chance to kind of pull away a little bit and kind of focus on a bit of normality before you can jump in again, right? It's kind of like that whole thing of, you know, when you're on the airplane and they tell you, you know, to pull down the mask and put it on yourself first, and then you help the child beside you or whatever. It's kind of a similar thing, right? Like we need to take that some time to make sure that we're ready so that we can then help other people, right?
Yeah.
So it's balancing that. And I get that there's a time element. I get that there's like, this is really urgent. There's an emergency. But the good news is that actually from what I've seen, I've been really impressed by the Tigray community, all the different channels, all the different, like you said, Twitter campaigns and online advocacy that's happening. Like there's someone else to carry if you want to pull out for a day or two, right? There is someone else who's going to keep things going, and you're going to keep it alive. And then once you feel like you've checked in with yourself and you feel like, okay, I can do this, then you can jump back in and do what you can, right? So
yeah. You're right there. This sense of reality, right? This is what's happening, and it is happening. And so how do I become the most effective of what I need to be right now, both as an advocate, as an activist, as well as a human being?
Right.
I would be remiss if I didn't just speak to a couple of the comments. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, I'm here with Mr. Brent Diaz, who is a therapist, spending this afternoon or / evening with us talking about the Tigray genocide. We have a couple of people just saying right off the bat, thank you, this is great therapy for us. And yes, we do acknowledge that this is a genocide.
Yes.
This
Yes.
we do. Eritrea Protector. You're here because maybe you need something from this session, so we invite you to stay. No amount of trolling, no amount of craziness or words like that you're spewing here will stop us from doing what we need to do. Actually, this is a really great example on what I hope and pray that our community doesn't fall into is I'm just proud of everyone who's here and not responding to this troll, because we have such fighting to do for the good, and we don't need to waste a breath on anything but what we need to focus on. So I've seen a shift in this. At the beginning, you're so disheartened that people would be fighting to stop humanitarian aid. People will fight you to stop what it is they think you're doing. But when you're not even mentioning, we haven't mentioned anything political, you know what I mean? But still people will feel hurt. And at this point, I think as a community, we just kind of more so feel sad for them, because what must you be going through to want to basically show up to stop other people from getting help? So we invite you to stay. Eritrea Protector, again, you must need something out of this session. So we do invite you to stay. Someone else said, I'd love to speak with this. I have missed my mom and dad and my siblings, whom I haven't been able to talk to since the war started. So these are some of the feelings, those of us who have not heard from loved ones. Can we speak to how some of the coping that we can be doing? What are some words of wisdom? And then I'd love to talk about how trauma enters the body and what it looks like when it's not processed.
Sure. So I guess in terms of the coping, you're looking at like coping like in that particular situation, or like not being able to hear news from family members. Yeah, that's not easy to deal with, of course. And, so sorry to hear that. And it's not like there's an easy answer to that one, right? At all. I think one really important thing we need to do is we need to hold out hope still, right? We need to keep that hope going, which again isn't easy to do. Like obviously right now, even I'm kind of grasping, right? It's like, how do you comfort someone who hasn't heard from their family since November or whenever it has been since the fighting began. But I think one aspect is that together, as a large community and as a broader worldwide community, we can hold out hope for those folks, knowing that there's still a lot of things that we're still learning about. There's still information just creeping out, and so hopefully you'll hear from your family members and your loved ones really soon. I think it's really important to gather, as you're doing today, in this small way, but gathering with other community members, other loved ones who are there to encourage you, who are there to support you. And some of the work that I've done, I've done some work with the Yazidi community in Iraq, and they've been through genocide at the hands of ISIS, and there's still some people who they're still missing. This happened, 5 years ago or 6 years ago, and they're still not sure where some of their loved ones are. And so what they do is they gather together, and the loved ones that they do have, and the community that they do have, and they talk about them. They kind of pray together and kind of work together and encourage each other. So I know it seems like a really simple thing, but that is something that is just huge to continue to encourage each other, and not necessarily just like with online stuff like this, although this is kind of important too, but also just in your personal circle, right? Make sure that you're building that and checking in with each other and opening up about how you're feeling with other people who really get it, who really understand, and who are going to encourage you and not judge you for it, right? So it's huge. And again, there's not like an easy answer, and there's not really anything that's really like shocking. And later on, we'll talk about some of the other tools to cope, which I think will help too with that. But again, just keeping that hope alive and meeting with other people. Like don't isolate yourself in this moment, because as you know, it's when those thoughts start racing. That's when things really get difficult. It's hard enough alone to not know where they are, but then to be thinking about things is really hard. So gathering together in a community, again, with people who maybe are going through the same thing or who understand, would be really helpful. And again, so sorry to hear about that, and I hope that you hear news really soon.
Perfect, Hadera. That was for you. I mean, you said it perfectly, especially now with COVID and general restrictions, not being able to, and we are a very communal culture.
Right. Yeah.
We know we celebrate together, we cry together, but you're right, just to understand this is not a time to be crying alone at home, that your sanity, I mean, hangs in the balance of you being able to let someone know, I'm not okay. That is a
Right.
phrase I've kind of been saying in our community right now, just as an example of how it may sound, is I'm not okay right now, and that's okay.
Yes.
You know what I mean? We're so used to saying, I'm all right, it's okay, I'm going to be okay, and just push through. And
Right.
luckily, as a community, we are getting a lot better at saying, no, I'm not okay. And, but it's all right. It's all right.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it takes something like this to kind of open up that idea, right? And maybe there is stigma about some of these pieces in the past, like admitting that you need help or admitting that you're not okay. But everybody's in the same boat in the community, right? Like everybody is grieving right now, and so it's not a measure of there's something. Like on the one hand, you're saying I'm not okay, right? But at the same time, it doesn't mean that there's something abnormally wrong with you. Even if you have all kinds of PTSD symptoms, again, it's your body is just reacting in a very natural way to something that is incredibly unnatural, incredibly wrong, right? So, yeah, the best way is to reach out to each other and maybe defy some of that stigma that's out there for people to ask for help.
Right on, right on. Thank you, Hadra says thank you. Almin says we needed this. Thank you. We need to mentally be strong, so we have to stop caring. We have to fight back, stop caring what other people are saying. We appreciate your expertise. Thank you guys so much. So Brent, let's get into, how does trauma show up in the body? How does trauma live in the body? Because we know it's not just mental, it's actually also very physical, and that one informs the other and vice versa.
Exactly. Yeah. You already have so much insight about that, just the way that you said it. So yeah, trauma, all of these things we're talking about, like you said, trauma, the body and the mind are interrelated, interconnected. It's, when you think about your brain, it's part of your physical body, right? And that's where our thoughts reside. And so this whole experience of trauma, I mean, without getting into too much detail, basically when we're under threat, our body kind of converts into survival mode. And in this survival mode, there we can have a reaction of, you've probably heard of flight or freeze, or fight or flight, right? So fighting your way out, or running away, or freezing. A lot of people freeze, especially during certain kinds of traumatic encounters. And so what happens during those times is the rational part of our brain kind of goes offline a bit, right? We're not really thinking rationally about things. We're just reacting in survival mode, just trying to get through something that's really awful in that moment, right? And so, so what basically happens is that our bodies is trying to gather resources in order to react to this threat that we're experiencing, right? So again, I'm not going to go into any details. You know, your loved ones are going through all kinds of stuff, or have gone through all kinds of stuff, and we don't need to necessarily talk about that in detail. But you face this threat, your body gathers the resources. You know, it could be like affecting your heart, it could be affecting your muscles, could be affecting your breathing, your digestion, and again, taking that rational side right out, you know. And so you have all this energy to react, whether to fight your way out or whether to flee, or even sometimes to freeze, right? Because that's the safest thing that your body's decided to do in that moment. So after that, after the threat is gone, to be honest with you, many people, maybe even most people, their bodies kind of return back to the normal state where the rational thought comes on, and like the heart and the breathing and the digestion and all that stuff kind of goes back to normal in the unthreatened state. But there's going to be a subset of people where that alert is, it continues on, right? It doesn't stop. It doesn't naturally resolve. It continues on. And so their bodies feel like that moment of threat. I actually read something today, actually, that talked about it in a way that I hadn't heard before. It's like they're saying, you know, when you're watching a horror movie, right, and the music is going and you know that there's something just about to happen and you get all tense and you're like waiting for something to happen, that kind of feeling for people who've experienced trauma, or people who have like lasting trauma symptoms, it's like that feeling of getting ready to protect yourself, which persists, you know, throughout their daily lives for months, maybe even years sometimes. And so if you can think about that, I mean, I can kind of feel it even as I talk about it, right? I can imagine what it feels like, and even feel it physically a bit.
Right.
Yeah, you feel tension, you feel anxiety, you feel worry. With that, eventually will come pain, because there's all kinds of cortisol like running through your body to, like, you know, get you ready to fight back or whatever. There's adrenaline going, but you know you can only last on adrenaline for so long, right? So it wears your body down in those ways, right? So these are some of the ways that trauma can impact. And like I said, I mentioned things like heart rate, breathing, and digestion. For a lot of people, their digestive tracts do get kind of get knotted up, right? And so we have a lot of people, a lot of the clients that I work with have stomach issues. A lot of the clients that I work with also have migraines, like regular migraines, or chronic pain as well, right? They're constantly in pain. So these are some of the ways that trauma can kind of manifest in the body. And you don't necessarily have to be thinking about the awful things happening, or the threatening thing that you experienced in order to feel these symptoms. You can feel these symptoms like even on a daily basis, because it's like that energy just hasn't been released yet out of your body, right? And again, you can be experiencing the same kind of symptoms as someone hearing about the news or hearing from loved ones about what's happening. You don't necessarily have to have gone through like the war or the genocide on the ground to have these feelings and have these pieces. So this might explain what some of you are feeling right now, maybe. So it gets kind of stuck, and there's things you can do, practical things that you can do that we'll talk about to help release some of that and process some of it and kind of get things moving. But that is, in a nutshell, kind of what happens to a lot of people. In fact, what happens a lot of times in genocide that we've noticed across different places in the world, like Rwanda, Iraq, and other places too, a lot of times the symptoms are felt in the body like that, because the various cultures, they don't really have a tradition of psychology so much, or like counseling, right? Like they don't really, you know, hasn't been part of their tradition for centuries. And there also might be some stigma about some of that stuff. Or, you know, also a lot of times because of the nature of genocide, there is a lot of cover up. I mean, it's interesting, you were acknowledging, you know, someone talking, you know, having different thoughts about stuff, like it's happening live in our chat right now. But there's cover up, which some people will then kind of be like, oh, well, yeah, I'm not going to even think about it. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to have complete silence. And it still is coming out in their bodies. So these bodily symptoms, is what I'm trying to say, is they're really prevalent in a situation like this, unfortunately. But the good news is that there are things that we can do to work on those.
There you have it. So interesting. So let's unpack just quickly. There's something that happens that's out of the ordinary
Hmm.
that jolts us. Our body is left sort of raw and really more than likely in a anxious fight or flight or fight or freeze,
Hmm.
right? We're really just clenched up and going through life with this defense mechanism and really anxious. Uh, and a lot of us may not even realize that we are walking around like this.
Yeah,
It's
great point. Yeah, yeah, it
very
can be outside of our
possible,
awareness, very much so.
right?
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a very possible. So, for example, I have a cousin, one of my many cousins that I'm more in communication with than ever right now. She actually is someone within our family that really reminds all of us to take care of ourselves and to really, she's great. I mean, all my family is great. I'm a little biased, but they're pretty special. Uh,
Mhm.
so I say to her, how are you doing? Are you taking care of yourself? And she says, I don't know. It's just, there must be a plan where I'm meant to be reminding everybody else because I'm great. I'm really great. I'm greater than probably I should be. And I notice while we're on the phone, she's asked to hold me to hold on, and she's gone to the bathroom, maybe three
Mhm.
times. This is just
Yeah.
very unlike her. And she says, "No, I'm really great. I know you worry about me, but I'm really great." And I said, I said, "Is this normal? Because I just don't remember you. We've had hours upon hours of conversation. Are you okay?" And she's like, "No, no, I'm fine. I just hold on. I'll be right back." In another bathroom break.
Hmm.
She is one of those people you talked about with,
Yeah.
the knotted stomach, and this is
Right.
anxiety driven uh,
Yeah.
restroom breaks. And yet, to her, because going to the bathroom is a natural function, she's not seeing, right? She's not, and various times on this program, we've talked about it's not going to show up like you would think, maybe in your
Right.
body,
Right.
maybe you're sleeping more, not losing sleep, you
Yes.
know maybe there's uncontrollable I don't know, eating when you think trauma would be lack of appetite, right?
Right.
um, maybe you drink but you have noticed you're drinking more. Maybe you smoke but you've noticed you're smoking more. So just all these sort of different ways that trauma may actually show up.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
with you explaining this feeling of just clenched anxiety, I really got why does people say first of all stop and breathe, because a lot of times when you start breathing you realize how tense everything is, right? When
Hmm.
I've been in sort of group meditative, right, situations where they say, be aware of your breath, now exhale, now let your shoulders drop, and you realize, oh my goodness, I've been like this the whole day, right? And
Exactly.
so
Yep.
for people who are not used to doing these sort of things, how can someone get into more of this? Maybe using the word meditation for some people may feel like it's a whole realm of thing to get into. But what
Yeah.
would you recommend? What's your go-to advice for people who kind of need to unwind a little bit?
For sure. Well, it's really all about focusing on your body, keeping that focus on your body and what's happening inside of you. And I think that in all the various spiritual traditions that are out there, that you can integrate that into your worldview, right? So yeah, to use the word meditation, I mean, for some people they resonate with that word. Other people they think that there's all kinds of other things associated with that, and I respect that. So I think that the bottom line is to work on becoming aware of what's happening inside of you, right? And just like you said, you again have such great insight. Just the idea of well, if I focus on my breath, and all of a sudden I'm realizing that my shoulders were tight, and I'm just taking little breaths, or my muscles are all tight, and no, okay, let me just focus on my breath and see where the tension lies and see if I can breathe. Now, there's one of the things I was going to mention to do is to breathe through your belly, right? Even if you
Mhm.
put your hand on your tummy and have that be the hand that's moving, right, as opposed to like your chest, right? And just practicing breathing like that. It's a completely physical thing. There's not necessarily anything spiritual related to that. But that kind of breathing actually brings back online all these different things that we talked about that kind of get shut down a bit in those moments of stress or those moments of threat. It brings back the capacity to for the rational thinking to start, and it triggers your body to start the relaxing processes, for lack of a better term, right? So breathing is a huge one. And I definitely, a lot of the clients I work with, again, they have embodied symptoms. They don't really have a tradition of psychotherapy, so they don't want to talk about the meanings behind all this stuff. They just want to feel better. And all they're reporting is physical stuff. So we breathe, right? We work on breathing. And I teach them that very thing, slow, deep breathing if you can. Or just like you said, just noticing your breathing. Sometimes you can just notice your breath without necessarily even changing it. Maybe you are still breathing shallowly. Maybe you still feel the tension in your shoulders or throughout your body. But a great first step is just to notice that that's happening, to notice that's happening within you before you even try to change it, right? So build that awareness of yourself, because a lot of the things you were talking about in terms of like these very symptoms that people are experiencing, they're things that are like you said, that we don't really think about. So the more awareness we bring into what we're doing and how we're feeling, then the more intentional we can be about things, right? I was trying to think of an example you gave, but it's escaping me. It's a lot of automatic things that I kind of think that we can bring into our awareness. So like the way we hold our bodies, like you were talking about, the way we're breathing, how tense our muscles are.
Sometimes we,
yeah, go ahead.
sometimes we don't even, I was gonna say, sometimes we don't even realize we haven't blinked. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's
I think about looking at the footage and you're just so beside yourself. And breathing is an involuntary muscle, but still, and yet I still find myself, that's a great example, drinking water. We're with the screen and not even realizing. And if we are dehydrated, there's so many illnesses we can fall under, and just dehydration is not fun. It's not. It brings about all the other things you mentioned: the headaches, migraines, muscle tension. I know it's not just my mom who talks about water being the healing, quality of everything. If ever anything is wrong, that's the first question she'll ask you is, "Have you had water?" And usually she's right on.
It's wise. It's very wise. Yeah.
It's true. It's true. Being mindful, being intentional, meaning on purpose, right?
Yeah, on purpose, being aware of what's happening, shifting your focus to what's happening inside or with you.
Focusing what's happening inside, focusing on breath, meaning breathe and listen to your breath. Breathe and take your mind towards your breathing pattern. Is it slow? Is it fast? Right now, we're rushing so fast to push out information. We're talking fast, we're eating fast, we're drinking fast, we're running fast, we're trying to get to the computer or to the phone fast. Everything is fast because everything else that we need to be fast, like information that our people are dying, is slow. United Nations Security Council's act to stop the genocide is slow. I think naturally the media is just now doing expository reports, in-depth reports on things that happened in November. So that is slow. So I think unknowingly we're working fast, trying to help bridge the gap. So
that was that's exactly it. That was one thing I wanted to mention. And again, so that idea of pacing, right? I even find myself trying to like share all this information. It's part of just who I am, but like I'm talking fast, I'm like doing lots of gestures and this and that, and and another word that we use a lot in therapy is grounding, right? Like, do you feel grounded, right? Do you feel like you're settled, in other words, or do you feel like you're kind of able to like rest and sit back a bit and just be present to yourself and to your surroundings, right? And so you're right. Like, I think a lot of times we can just get so frantic with all the stuff we have to do, and it's all comes from a good place, obviously. Like, you're wanting to help, you're wanting to stop the violence, you're wanting to, bring healing and stuff. But we can get so wrapped up and so kind of energized by this to the point where we do become overwhelmed and we do become stressed out and anxious. So if you think about it, there's like two different states. Yeah, two different states. So there's this one state where it's kind of that anxious energy of like rushing and like, you know, you're ramping up your energy to address the trauma or the violence, right? And then there's that other state where you're kind of more relaxed and you're more settled, right? And there's going to be times when you need to kind of lean into that anxious sort of energy, right, to get things done a little bit. Like it's a natural state, obviously, but you don't really want to be in that state for too long, because that's where the pain comes. That's where the lack of sleep or the too much sleeping comes. That's where the stomach issues come, right? So you want to be able to bring yourself back into that more settled state, again, through things like breathing. Just to add some more practical ideas, things like going for a walk is a really, you know, like a really simple way you can do this. Like you said, drinking water. Another one that I hear about people doing and stuff is dance too, right? Like when trauma kind of gets locked in your body, if there's a way that you can express yourself through dance, obviously in a state, you know, in a manner that's appropriate for your location and who you are and stuff, but some kind of movement, some kind of, and it doesn't have to be anything like professional or even like a therapeutic movement. It could just be any movement that feels good to you. I certainly have had clients.
Move the body.
Yeah, move your body, and it really helps them. It really helps to kind of loosen that sense of feeling like you're locked into the anxious state. So just simple things like that can be really helpful to kind of remember, to remind yourself to practice, to get back into that more settled state, rather than the state of like, oh, I gotta get all this stuff done, right?
Yeah, but still allows you to get that nervous energy out. It's so interesting when this genocide began. Of course, sometimes, I mean, of course, you're not going to feel celebratory, you know.
Yeah.
And when we say dance, you know, Brent said it. However that shows up for you, whatever that looks like for you. There is something called mesged in our religion, in our culture, and it is basically kneeling and standing up in prayer. And it's, you do it, you know. I don't know. I mean, there are moments during prayer moments that you can do that during which you can do different forms of that, but you know, your body knows what it needs. And I just remember out of the blue, I had this need to sagad. And I mean, I'm sharing this, of course, with our people, because it's all about movement. And sometimes you don't want to stop prayer. You don't want to stop thinking about it. You don't want to stop the advocacy. So this is also something to, you know, we can commune with God as we also let it out. So it's in my heart to say it. So I'm going to say it.
Totally.
So I said it.
Totally. Yeah.
I do want to check on some of the comments. Hagere Tigray, thank you so much. Always with us and always with the good word. Thank you for your dedication, says Hagere Tigray. Thank you, Hagere. Thank you for always really pushing us in the most positive way. Tigray, please, they did a lot of genocide to a lot of Muslim people. Yes, way back. So we are talking right now about what's going on, and that's right. This situation, unfortunately, doesn't have it does not discriminate religion, gender, age. So we acknowledge that. We acknowledge that. And this is we're wanting at least an hour out of your time that you are able to think about your mental wellness, because we know your mental wellness means the community's mental wellness. So we can't be focused so hard on one thing that everything around us falls apart, and then we fall apart, and then there's no one to advocate. And I dare not talk about mental health or self-care within any other context except advocacy, because I know that's where we are. I know you don't want to hear it. I don't want to even think about it, because that's where we are. I just want to stigmatize self-care is not something to be ashamed of, and it's not a selfish thing.
That's right.
Just because the word self is in there, it does not mean you're only thinking about yourself. But if you fall apart, everything you're trying to do falls apart.
Right. That airplane analogy, right? Do the mask for
Yeah,
yourself, and you can
yeah.
the others. Yeah,
Because
exactly.
right, because what it is if you pass out trying to give somebody else oxygen, then that person is doomed and you're doomed for sure.
Right.
And God forbid you're the pilot, because then everybody on the plane is doomed, right?
Right.
To take it a step
Exactly.
further. Brent, having acknowledged that this broadcast may be being reached to those people who are either within Tigray or have thankfully escaped, and maybe within the capital city of Ethiopia, who, by the way, all Tigrayans everywhere, different formats, different levels of discrimination, but are facing discrimination everywhere. So, what would you say, and no pressure, but what would you say to those who have experienced that level of trauma we were talking about, just face to face, have either seen loved ones being, killed in front of them, have been violated, all of these things that we're reading about and we're fighting against? What, maybe, I mean, everything we're talking about right now may seem like a luxury to them,
Yeah.
and understandably,
Yeah.
how can you within a room find solace?
Hmm.
How can one within themselves be their own savior for for
Right.
for moments at a time, to feel the want to get through the day? What do you
Yeah.
say to
Well.
people, clients
Yeah.
who may be suicidal,
For sure. Well, first of all, my heart goes out to you, and I know you don't know me, and chances are we won't meet. But there are people like me who are watching this news and are really distressed about this and really impacted. I'm so sorry to what's happened to you, and hopefully, if enough of us put ourselves out there and say we want to help somehow, then things will improve for your people and for you personally. I think that what Helena said earlier was really really important. It was just a quick little phrase, but something along the lines of that our bodies have wisdom inside, or I think the way you said it was our bodies know what they need, right? And so one way, if you are in a room by yourself and you don't really have anybody else to kind of consult or to help you right now, I think still that key aspect of believe it or not, but listening to your body in the ways we've been talking about will actually be helpful to you. It doesn't obviously change what happened to you, like I understand that, right? And the healing journey is one that is long, or can be long. It can be fraught with difficulties and complications, but your body does have a lot of wisdom. Your body actually wants to heal. That's the way your body is designed. It wants to heal. It wants to move forward. It wants to help you process these pieces. So really listening and really paying attention to what's happening inside and what thoughts are coming to mind. Even as, let's say, you're focusing on your breathing, if you're having a certain thought that keeps popping in there, think about it, right? I've heard of people and work with people too who write down these kinds of thoughts when they come up. So then maybe they'll be doing a breathing exercise and a thought will come, and so they'll write them down. And they don't show them to anybody else. They don't even necessarily tell me as their counselor what they're writing a lot of the times. But somehow getting that out actually moves the memory or the thought to like a different part of the brain just a little bit, which actually helps to process things, right?
Yeah.
So again, that just trusting the wisdom of your body that way is really important. I want to also say, and this really goes out to everybody, but I think that it's important for the people who've actually lived through this on the ground too. You're part of a community that's been around for a really, really long time. You've been through a lot over the years. And as a community, as a people, there's so much resilience, so many amazing traditions, some of which were already spoken about today, in terms of like that spiritual piece that a lot of you share. But there's a history of resilience there that you can tap on or think about, right? When I'm going through a hard time, I'll be honest, I think about my grandmothers and just their strength, and they both passed on. And I know this is a very different situation, so I'm not, hopefully it doesn't sound like I'm minimizing what you've been through, but I think about my grandmothers. I think about their strength, all they went through, all that they taught me when they were here, and other family members too. But for some reason, they're the ones who always come to mind for me. And so I would ask you to think about that too. Maybe who can you think of a way that your culture has been resilient and has weathered other storms in the past, and what happened, or maybe even people in your life that you know, right? Draw from that strength, draw from that tradition to be able to move forward. I think it's also important, and I know it's really hard to ask for help, and even if it's just a loved one that you're in touch with, or if there's a maybe you're in a clinic somewhere, maybe you're in a camp somewhere. If there's somebody you can ask you just for help for like the next piece, right? Whether it be you need a practical need met, or there's some pain in your body, or there's you are struggling with the memories and the thoughts. Talking about it and reaching out again is such an important thing to do to connect with each other. And so you'll see here, obviously, there's all kinds of people who've logged on to be with us today. There's a lot of people out there who care, and we're all pulling for you. Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, it feels like a lot of things I'm saying aren't enough. Like honestly, because what you've been through is so much. But there are people who care. You come from a strong tradition, and listen to your body. I think that would be the way that I'd answer that question, just off the top of my head.
It's wonderful. If I had hoped for anything, it would be more than I had hoped. It's wonderful. I do want to read you some of these wonderful comments. Tigray will prevail. That is a fact. We have Chase saying, thank you for this platform. What you're talking about is everyday struggle. What I and lots of in my circle are going through, this is definitely every single day exercise and must do. You're right, Chase. Shalom says, good point, good point. This gentleman is going to be blocked. He's gotten everything he needs for the day. Hagara Tigray says, thank you so much. Thank you, Brent, for your contribution. Also, Shalom says, we're listening from Tigray Network Group. So hello to you, Tigray Network Group. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you continue to do all the good works that we've been hearing about and take all of this to the community. Rahel writes, my cousin needs this counseling because she can't stop crying. And she refers to a very traumatic video that was going around, which I did see, and I totally understand of a violation. I will say that. I encourage them not to watch these graphic videos. Definitely prayer and sigdet are helping a lot. Thank you guys. So useful. And Rahelwa, I'm so glad that you're there for your cousin. And you're right. If you feel like she needs counseling, then it's possible that you may be her only hope in making sure she gets counseling. These are things that definitely keeps you up at night, and very hard to erase from your mind. And for some of us, it's just going to hit in a different way.
Yeah.
I have a 1-year-old, so being present constantly is a must. So he really grounds me. And I can't even imagine going through this without having a catalyst for being grounded. So if she's alone, Rahel, please, I'm holding you accountable for and I know you're already doing good works with her because you're even mentioning her. So I pray everything goes well and that you can help her get that help. If you need referrals, please reach me. I've got a couple of referrals that I can send you to.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Yes, and then keep up the good work. Thank you. The truth always wins says, I love these names. Realize that how resilient Tigray people are, says Team Moonlight. You're right. And actually, Brent, you said it, our ancestors and all that they went through. The fact is, Tigray in itself is a beacon of light for all things autonomy, all things of self-governance, and all things of, just fighting for your right. And this is yet another chapter within this, from this context. So thank you, guys. We talked about what trauma is. We talked about what it could look like, what triggers are. We touched on PTSD. We talked about how trauma lives within the body, how it shows up. We talked about how those of us outside of the country can do little things to help ourselves, therefore helping our community in coping, dare I say, even possibly thriving through this moment so that we are ever ready to rebuild our country of Tigray. We talked about those who are within the country and have faced all these atrocities and may, like we said, be in a room by themselves and how to possibly help oneself deal with this. And the running theme I'm seeing is, and I'm noticing is stillness. And
Mhm.
I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't know what you think, Brent, but I don't think it's a coincidence. I'm reminded of the paraphrase. I think it's something like in the Bible it says, "Be still and know I am God."
Right.
I don't think it's a coincidence that the "be still," because when we are in motion, sometimes we can fool ourselves into thinking we're progressing, but not until there's stillness, I think, can we really assess. So even within meditation, if we're using meditation time to pray, to listen to our inner voices, I thought what you shared was so powerful to write down certain words or phrases that continue to come up during our breathing.
Hmm.
And that takes it from sort of what you already know portion of your brain to, or what you didn't know you were saying, even
Right.
to what
Yeah.
now you realize, right? I think that's what you were saying. We could be
Absolutely.
saying this,
Yeah.
right? We could be saying these things and not even realize, and suddenly you write it down and you look at this journal, and maybe you have this couple of phrases all over the journal, and you're like, wow, I didn't even realize I was thinking like this. So there's so much power in understanding how your brain is functioning through something like this. Um, I really hope, if at the very least, that comes through from this broadcast, to take time to just be still and
Hmm. Yeah.
know that God hasn't abandoned us.
Right. Yeah.
I know, I know it's, I mean, I know. And also I feel it's hard for a lot of us to uh, come to God the way we used to be able to.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
we have a very, patient God, and always there. We're the ones who are in and out. So I think there is also solace in that, in knowing that there's strength that is our advocate, uh, and speaks for us. So I would love to give you a chance to to say anything you wish were out there in the world, because I also saw that you did was it a marathon for Tigray? It was something.
Yeah. Yeah. I did a running challenge thing in early March. Where I raised money for we did, but the words haven't come in to this space quite yet in the same way, but people who've been raped, right? And in Tigray and other regions too, regions that of people that I work with, and other people that I've just heard of. So I've picked a few organizations, including at least two or three that work directly in Tigray, and just raised money and just asked people to sponsor me as I did a running challenge over a weekend in the first weekend in March here. So yeah, I mean, I'm not like a professional runner or anything, but I was able to raise a little bit of money just to go towards those efforts, and in the process, just tried to raise some awareness about some of these issues, just in my own little social circle and the people that I know. So it was just one other little way that I could try to contribute, because I felt like I was sitting back and I wanted to do something and I wasn't sure what yet, and I wasn't sure about any
Mhm.
opportunities. I hadn't met you yet, for instance. So it was just one way that I could contribute. So yeah, I think too what you were saying about spirituality and God, of course, is super important too. And without going over our time or anything, there's like a Bible story where I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe, but I'm pretty sure it's Elijah. It's up in the mountain. I think it's Elijah. And like there's a storm, and like the Bible says God wasn't in the storm. There's like fire and thunder and stuff, and God wasn't in that. but he, then there's like a still small voice, right? And that's where God was. So it's just confirming what you said about the idea of that stillness and the voice of God that we can tap into once we are still, right? Different people are going to have different ways of understanding that. And again, I understand there might be a very diverse audience out there. And I respect that for sure. But for those people who maybe carry that tradition that, and see things through like that Christian perspective in one way or another, I think that there is a really, really rich understanding of that in the Bible and in the various people who've served God over the years. So the idea of taking that time to be still and to open up, and there's all kinds of I want to say all kinds of books, as you might know, in the Bible that talk about people lamenting over things like genocide, to be honest with you, really. And so there might be some strength you can draw from books of Lamentations. The book of Jeremiah comes to mind too. Things like that. I don't know. Just felt like sharing that.
No, it's so great. I it didn't even dawn on me there would be talks of genocide within the Bible, but
yeah,
it makes sense. Yeah, but that word, you feel alone within that word, and you feel like, hey, the Holocaust and of course Rwanda and Syria. I mean, there are just certain group of people you feel like have gone through it, but of course it is, and it does feel like biblical times. It just feels, but it definitely makes sense that would be there. Yet something else to find solace.
Yeah.
That it has come and gone, and we so much prayer for the people who have gone, and still drawing strength from understanding that this is not this is not the life God has for us, and to hold steady and continue to strive to be well.
And that calling out to him in that vulnerability that you have to, right? Calling out in prayer. So important to do, I think. And I'm sure people are already doing it. So I would just say continue, right?
Yeah. As we acknowledge every time we have this is actually our 7th in the conversation series. So thank you so much to everyone who's by word of mouth is sharing this. And I know we have so many people watching, and then it's watched again after the recording is shared. And we're just praying that this reminds you, even an hour and a half, or however long you're with us, how important your mental health is, and that you're not alone. You're not alone. For those who are within the country, we continue to scream at the top of our lungs. You're not alone. You will never be forgotten. There is, I don't know how to say this, but there is no fresh air knowing that you are going through the horrors that you're going through. We're not normal, if that makes any sense. So, and also acknowledging part of mental health is also understanding what's going on. So I will speak to some of the upcoming protests, because I think also, I don't know, inside I feel people not knowing if something's being done around the country, around the world, also really, that anxiety, it heightens that anxiety. So I will remind everyone, Tagaru Events, TEGARU Events, EVENTS on Instagram, continues to do their good works in posting up and coming protests. Thank you everyone who showed up to the national protests in DC and New York. With this thing, to say successful, it sounds crazy, but to me, success is people taking the time to show up, to be the faces and the voices of those who've been currently silenced. So thank you so much. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for those, from those of us who couldn't attend this one. This is the 3rd of April, and today there were many. Seattle had March. So up and coming. Also today in DC, the Tagalog Kids Rally. I can't wait to see footage from there. Thank you so much. Regarding the kids, I want to remind you that we're still doing actually it's just beginning. We're having everyone and anyone who can, who has kids in their lives, whether they're yours or nieces or nephews, we're doing cards, handmade cards to our kids that are in the refugee camps in Sudan.
Beautiful.
So,
Yeah.
Brent, this is something that's dear to my heart because I also was one of the kids in the refugee camps and in Sudan. So actually, my parents reminded me one of the camps that is reopened right now was the one we were in briefly before. We were in a holding area in Khartoum to get our paperwork for America. But I just remember your mind as a child is on all the worries that your parents may have,
Of
even if you
course.
don't know
Yeah.
what's going on. You just, and I just remember looking in the darkness, waiting for our dad to come home from meetings and things like that. All this pent up anxiety. And as an adult, I am one of those people. Instead of saying "How you doing," I will say, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay?" So that's one of my tells. So I just think
Right.
about all those kids and what they're going through right now, and to be able to have a piece of paper in their hands to show them someone is thinking of you, but not to hurt you.
Yeah.
So just putting out there, please contact me. We have groups of people that are going to the camp, so we're going to be stashing these cards within those groups and disseminating them there. We're just saying, I don't know you, like you said, Brent, but I'm thinking of you. I don't know you, but I love you. God is with you. Just letters of love, and that's going on. So you can reach me at Helena Now at gmail.com or Helena Now on all social media platforms. Denver, Colorado. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the 30th. That's past April 3rd. Also, Bay Area had something today. Thank you. April 7th, Boston has a 2-day protest. Um, April 17th, there is a nationwide motorcycle and car protest condemning Tigray genocide and Eritrean refugee abductions within Tigray. So, really thankful our communities are coming together for these protests. There's power in numbers, and both communities are being done unto, even though it is, the federal troops, the Amhara troops, and militia, as well as the Eritrean troops. Yes, and let's remember also they're targeting refugees of both cultures. So uh, let's come together in the streets and just be powerful like that. I'm going to scan through one last time through these. Thank you for God. Thank you, um, Rita. Good luck with that. Um, I like the idea of journaling. Hope Faith says, thank you both for the advice. Awesome. Awesome. Uh, and that's what we have for you today. Brent, thank you so much. I'm just going to put you on the record as coming back. Is that okay? I'm just going to put you on the spot. You will
For sure.
return.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be my honor. Thank you so much for having me again. I'm not being from the community. I know that this is such a personal, tender. That's maybe not the right word, but like a really, really sensitive time. And so for you to invite me, a stranger in this, it's a huge honor. So thank you so much, and I hope something that I've said today will comfort someone or impact them somehow. So again, thank you so much. It's definitely my honor to be here.
The pleasure and honor is all ours. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for spending this hour. We wish you and your family all the blessings, and I can't wait to continue this conversation. And I also can't wait to see the fruition of what you and cousin Dr. Meron are cooking up for our community.
Most definitely.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you, everyone who spent this hour and 9 minutes with us. You can again reach me at Helena Now on all platforms. Let's continue doing what we're doing, and please take care of yourselves as we continue to say. And I hope you're reminding yourself that Tigray will prevail. Nisa Arena. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.